All right. Well, hey there, everyone. I am Scott King, and that is Chris Kraus. Hey, Chris.
How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Union Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of establishing smooth and effective business workflows across people. Maybe because you need to think about that before you jump into an AI implementation. I mean, AI is all the hype, Chris, but the underlying process that the AI drives, right? It needs good data, the AI does,
Yeah.
and it needs good processes. So let's discuss why that is important, because there may be opportunities where you can grab some ROI on a process for human resources, for customers, for orders, for supply chain, what have you.
Yeah.
But I mean, you still need to have a repeatable, workflow that people can pay attention to, right? And like everyone
Yeah.
has a standard operating procedure for everything. Let's talk about
But
automating some of those.
but they may change, right? So the thing is, AI is not a silver bullet. It should be part integrated into your process, how you interact with systems and people. But the point is, you may need to say, okay, I want to change a process to make it more effective because I have AI applied into it. So it's like AI by itself, you're gonna have to do a little bit of process engineering. This is not a 6 month crazy, let's change everything, but it's like, how do you inject it in to help make a decision? How you have help people make decisions to expedite things? What can it do to say deflect and people not have to make decisions? But there's that whole concept of, let's do a little, I'm going to say process engineering light, and that way we actually put it in the right spot and it's very assistive and helpful.
Yeah, because you may not be taking a high level enough view when if you're going to use AI and you're using it to help you with a task or help you to make a decision or look at some data. There's a before and after, right? There's a
Right.
before step where you're getting the data. There's an after. Your AI must do something, right? We talked about that in a
Hmm.
previous podcast. So let's talk about some different business workflows that maybe everyone could like understand.
Yeah.
Um,
So you mentioned earlier like manufacturing and that. And interesting, I was working with a customer and they've have all the classic supply chain and ERP packages in place to help manage standard orders, demand planning, forecasting, supply chain engines, help them figure out how many parts are in the fab and how long it takes and all that. But they actually have a reasonable amount of specialty business. So one reason customers like them or pick them over other manufacturers because they can do special one-off runs of things. They can handle specialty requests, but a specialty request actually involves a sign-off from like 5 or 6 parts of the organization. Like the sales guy has to say, yes, we want to do this. And then their manager has to say, high value customer, I'm willing to be neutral and not make a ton of money on this to make sure they're happy. Then you actually have to talk to manufacturing. And that could be anything from supply chain. It's like, do we have the raw materials? Can we retool? Do we know how to make this in the engineering department? And then do we have the capacity to actually build it? So like some things like capacity, there's been like models out there saying supply chain. We work for supply chain companies who could forecast if you had a disruption, do you have the capacity to do extra work or not? Or could you resequence things? But then that's one person says, yes, I've looked in the supply chain system. We can handle this. Manufacturing says, yes, we know how to retool and build this. The people downstream who actually raw materials say, yes, we have inventory buffer for this, or we can expedite shipment of an inventory buffer for it. Then, of course, like all good things, it has to go through financial and accounting to say, okay, are we willing to actually maybe be neutral on margins and build these for a customer as a one-off? There's always cost in the manufacturing of retooling, resequencing, all those things, right? Mm-hmm. So it involves lots of parts of the organization and everybody has to sign off. But they said in the today world, this is horrible and it takes forever because a sales guy does this maybe an admin is keeping track of this in a spreadsheet and people are emailing and asking different people for approvals and they don't know where it is. And like if it's a young sales guy, someone new to the company, they won't even know who to ask and what the processes are because they're all manual. So really having AI to help to make decisions, say in manufacturing, prediction, supply chain, those are important, but then you still have to get the sign off and the organization to agree upon the common goal. So that's literally orchestrating people, approvals, things like that, and getting visibility back to say the regional sales manager and the sales guy that we're going to do this and we can do it and we can commit. So you have to realize that, AI can help make decisions for a role, like you said, my specific task, but then you have to coordinate. If not, what's a sales guy do? Run around with the phone all the time, calling everybody and bugging them? Can I do this?
And maybe like writing a report or just the numerous conference calls to get everybody in the same context, right? Because someone in finance may not understand, like, hey, this is a really important customer. There's a follow-on deal. Something that is outside of the larger story. You're not going to be able to handle that because you don't have the right context, which makes these things so manual, right? The story is what sells it. And a sales guy running around and, he's not going to know. I don't know this, but I'm assuming he or she does not know the tear down and setup costs inside the factory, to build something that just eats up margins, right? But automating this as a story would be helpful, and then we'll put AI on it later, right? Because once we create it, we can automate some pieces and look for efficiencies that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like that example because one, I think most people can understand it if they've worked at a big place or sold solutions like we did into supply chain. You understand the multi-step process and can understand the bill of materials for that. What's another example that maybe is a little more people oriented? HR example or something.
Yeah, and this every company has now. There's the concept of remote work. So, we went remote with COVID because we had to, but now people are being very hybrid and flexible. Like, am I a remote employee or an on-campus employee certain days of the week? And then there's actually, what's interesting enough is like international travel. Like I've always worked in software. And so the concept that I had to get to every system remotely, say when I worked for a company in Virginia, I could get to it from Texas or I could get to it from England, right? So that whole concept of international travel and remote, I had a company laptop, I had special VPNs, I could get to different things, and it was just a given.
Yeah.
But it's because I work for a software company. So the whole point was we built integration software. We should be able to integrate and work anywhere. But, some companies have regulations on that. Is the data HIPAA compliant? Is there privacy concerns in the data? Are there trade secrets in the data? Are you touching operational systems versus, say, like accounting systems, right? So there's a lot of things that come into play. So I was talking with a customer, and they were in a very regulated industry, NERC and FERC and all those cool things. And so they said, we do allow people to have access to some systems when they travel internationally. So like if you're in the US, you can go to Canada because we have factories there. We have reasons to be there, or Mexico. But then like in Europe and the Middle East, the rules all change. And so what systems can you get access to? Can you get to email on your personal machine? Do you have to have a company machine with high encryption? So it was actually all a manual process. Like you talked to your manager and said, I'm going on this international business trip to Canada to work with suppliers. So they literally had to say, okay, your normal work, normally have a laptop because you work remote, or you work in the office every day. We have to ask IT to issue a notebook, and then IT needs to know where you're going to be, and they need to know what type of software you should have access to, like operational systems or historical systems or sales data. And so it's actually an interesting problem. And because I've always worked in non-regulated industries, it was never an issue. But for these guys, what data did you access? where are you accessing it from was really a big thing. And not everybody had a notebook. Like in software, we were probably early adopters that everybody had a notebook computer. Some people still, like you and I, we do work on desktops every day because it's got big screens and they're fast, right?
Yeah, just because so I can see the screen. But
Yeah. And so stands that. But I think it's an interesting concept because you think about those workflows. You approve it, your manager approves it. HR may need to say, okay, when you talk to travel, we give you special health insurance here. We don't have health insurance for that country. Do you need special provisions there? IT may say, no, you need a special loaner laptop that we've ultra locked down and it's highly encrypted. And we have a GPS tracking device in it, things like that. So IT's involved. And then actually all the IT systems. Like these days, some companies you can log into your email from any browser. Others, it's like, this is not a company machine. You can't log in.
Yeah.
And the VPNs won't connect you if you're not on the continental US. Like the VPN is looking at where are you and will block things. So there's IT provisions things and they turn them on and they turn them off. So you actually want a workflow that says turn on access, say for Scott to go to England for a week and he can have access to all of his marketing information while he's at a conference, but then turn it off on this date because he should be back in the US, right? So there's actually the wind up and then the wind down of all those things. And so, and it's people actually, this isn't made up, people actually do this, right? It's actually important, like to be able to understand where your data is being accessed from and what systems they have access to.
Yeah, I can't imagine the variability of some of those policies. Like you said, this was a company in critical infrastructure, or a government contractor or a government agency to be able to do that. And then it just seems like the high degree of variability. Where would they keep that? In some like outdated document and somebody's in charge of populating all those rules?
Yeah, so they had a lot of SharePoint sites and a lot of it was like, what's the risk for Brazil versus risk for Mexico versus different countries in South America. It was actually country specific versus continent specific. And so it was very manual process. And so, a lot of times people would just not have access or they kind of give up and say, I'm going to be out for 2 weeks because I'm at this thing and I'll let you know when I get back. But which usually for a lot of people, if you're working remote, you need to be able to actually work remote. It's some capability, right?
Yeah, because otherwise you just give up, right? You can't connect and you can't do anything, and you got to do everything, on your local machine. And in the machines, like nowadays, like locally, they do less and less things, right? Because you're connected to all these cloud services anyway, and different SaaS platforms. So if people, if companies did orchestrate these workflows, whether it be the supply chain manufacturing example, selling a specific item or a specialty item to a specific customer for some reason, and then the HR, how can you gain overall efficiencies by doing that? Is there, is it documentation efficiency? Is it the fact that I can audit the process and create the story? Does it save me money? Does it save me time? Like what should people look for if they're doing this?
Well, one thing could be compliance. Okay, did we actually go through a process and document that every person has signed off to actually build this item? Or if they said no, we have a reason why. So we've documented it. And so, because from a manufacturing process, someone may want to know at the end of the month, why do we have these exceptions in inventory, or these we didn't manufacture the standard amount, we were below forecast, things like that. So actually documentation for compliance reasons there. And then with like the remote work and all that, it is just as important to wind things down and turn them off as they did turn them on. Because like an auditor at the end of the year, when they're doing a security audit, they may say, well, why do you have, all these 50 employees have access to the IT systems from Canada and the VPN? Why do you have all these special rules that you forgot to turn off? So there could be legitimate compliancy reasons, like that need to know where access, only access you need, temporal turning things on and turning things off. If it's not an automated process, who's going to remember to go do that? It's like everybody says, I'm going to try a free movie service and then cancel it the day before I get billed. And then they forget. And then the next month, the day after they get the bill, they're like, oh, I meant to cancel that. And the next month, right? So it's like, but in this case, there's nothing to remind you, right? Unless you have an automated process that orchestrates people, says, you turn this on, you need to turn this off. Turn this on, this is the date it expires. And sometimes it's an automated action in the workflow to do it. Maybe sometimes it's like it nudges a person, please confirm you manually turn this off, and then you have documentation of that end-to-end process.
Yeah, that reminds me. So the App Store has these orchestrated workflows, because I got a notification yesterday that says, hey, your subscription is going to renew for this app, because I bought it through the App Store. I didn't buy it, through the app itself. And then it says your subscription is going to renew. If you want to cancel, you better do it, right?
Yeah.
I got that yesterday. I remembered it today. I'll forget it tomorrow.
Yes.
And so I'll end up paying for it. But, some of the other, from an outside of the cost perspective, right? Some of the other pitfalls in a situation like this could be time related. There's a delay in a certain number of steps. I think the real thing is all the time delays. It's normally like a person, right? I mean, it's never like a system. A system, you ping it and it tells you an answer. But all these, workflows, they have too many people too many steps are depending on the people. Like, how do we get rid of that?
Right. And so that's where you get into like escalation. Because like say it's the manufacturing thing and it's very you need to do it quickly. Or maybe the travel request is under 2 weeks versus over 2 weeks. So if you're asking multiple people for approvals and they're on vacation, maybe their out of office is turned on, maybe it's not. So how do you know? The workflow has to then escalate to their managers, escalate to a secondary person for approvals, so things don't get stuck. Because that's what happens a lot of time. If you need 5 approvals, are you going to get all 5 the next day? No, because people are busy doing other things. They need to be nudged. They can be out of office. So their managers need to have an automatic approval or escalation path. And so people don't have the redundancies like, IT systems do. We have backup systems, we have backup routers, but a lot of times the people backups are very manual. And so having automation of people helps make that more of a automatic failover process, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, the redundancy is the out of office message. What you just mentioned going on vacation. Pretty soon, like, you won't need those. Because if you're inside a process and you need the next step, and you email a person and they say that they're out of office, it immediately tells you got to contact somebody else. If I ask for an approval in an automation platform, it's already asking the other person. It's already escalated that ask, like you were talking about. So that's kind of an interesting view, like how to maybe we should do a podcast, like the, retiring out of office messages or something. That could be kind of interesting. So, the obvious benefits are getting things done quicker. And then the compliance aspect, I'm glad you mentioned that. How, what would the supply chain process look like? If it was completely automated, what would it look like?
Yeah, so the things that we could get out of systems automatically, like forecasting systems and all the machine learning to do forecasting, say, instead of someone manually looking it up, it could say, yes, we have capacity to build this. We can do the tear up and tear down. Engineers usually still need to sign off on a specialty product. But so, they can do their sign-offs there. And then from an accounting perspective, if they're given all the information on the front end, it says all these people can do it and we can be revenue neutral or not based on what manufacturing has told us, it'll make their decisions faster, right? And so it is about getting that velocity up and not dropping the ball and saying, oh, did we not get this done? What's the status of this? There's none of those running around getting statuses and that. So we can actually use AI to help people make the decisions. Sometimes AI can make the decision, and then that tells us, okay, this is what we predicted. Well, do you agree, continue? So we can actually help do some of the back end work.
I mean, that makes sense. When you mention the AI and the AI, a prerequisite is good data and good processes. It could learn across all these different situations, depending on, when the order comes in. I mean, there's 100 scenarios that we could walk through.
Yep.
And then the international travel one, I think would be the same, but you would still have to maintain some type of rules for safe travel, right? Like it's because the different areas of the world, I wouldn't want to go to Russia or Ukraine right now, but
Right.
But previously that was less of a risk, right? So you would still have to have some type of rules based,
Risk
safe
management,
travel, or how would that work, especially with VPN access, right? I don't want to log into anything from some parts of the country or some parts of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And so that orchestration there, because it happened when we were at a big company, like when you're in Brazil, and that you had special policies in place for approved hotels, approved car services, and the hotel was always right across the street from the office, so that minimize risk and all those things. So there's risk management that the HR systems have and travel systems have, and then there's IT risk of how sensitive is the data you're taking with you. Can you take it on the machine or not? Do you VPN in and all those things? And so there's a lot of risk management that's actually you can orchestrate away and help AI with those things, because AI can scan like the internet quickly for the latest threats. It can you can have calls to the State Department to say because they give you code names, red, yellow, green, for countries and travel and things like that. So that all those things can be brought together to actually make that process faster, and you spend less human time figuring out. And then it's very consistent in how you do the approvals or not.
Okay. Reduce human time, right? I mean, we need to be doing more important things anyway than chasing people down. All right, so I appreciate it, Chris. I like those examples. If you were going to sum up, what we talked about today, what should people do based on kind of this orchestrating people, processes across people?
So I think the first thing we talked about is, say you want to make a process better. Sometimes it's document the current state and figure out what are the incremental things we can make it better. Sometimes it's applying AI and ML with decisions. Sometimes it's getting access to systems and processes. Sometimes it's, how can we orchestrate people so they're not the long pole of a decision or something, but bringing those together. And it doesn't mean you have to do a 6-month, long analysis. It's like, no, literally look at a process that goes across multiple steps in the organization past your desktop. Like you mentioned, data comes from somewhere. What you do goes to the next place based on your task, and figure out what are the incremental changes you can make to make them more efficient. You don't have to re-engineer the entire company. Just look at what are the 2 steps above and below your process, and then make those better.
Yeah, super. All right, well, thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for listening. Please tune in, subscribe to the Union Podcast, and catch all of our automation and AI content. And appreciate everybody's time. Until next time, thanks, Chris. Bye.
Thanks.